Chloe, where in God's name is the money for the auction? Mark's hissed whisper was a raw, furious tearing sound, barely audible over the elegant string quartet, yet it felt like 1,000 decibels in my ears. His face, usually so calm, was contorted, jaw tight, eyes darting around the opulent ballroom as if every crystal chandelier was mocking us. My stomach dropped, a cold, sickening lurch, because I knew instantly what this meant. We had meticulously planned this evening, accounted for every detail, especially the charity auction payment for Aunt Carol's incredibly important milestone birthday, and now, here, in front of everyone, something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. "What are you talking about, Mark?" "It's right here, in my purse, with the cards," I whispered back, my voice trembling despite my desperate attempt to sound composed, my hand instinctively patting my clutch, which felt sickeningly light. A horrifying chill crept up my spine as my fingers met only the silk lining, no wallet, no cards, nothing. My breath hitched, a desperate gasp, as I realized the unthinkable had happened. The carefully organized evening, the effort to appear effortless, it was all crumbling, spectacularly, right here, right now. Then, from just behind us, a peal of laughter, sharp and triumphant, cut through the genteel murmur of conversation like a perfectly aimed dart. It was Bethany, my sister-in-law, her head thrown back, a wide, malicious grin plastered across her face, tears of mirth streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, sis-in-law," she shrieked, the words dripping with mock sympathy, loud enough for at least a dozen well-heeled guests to turn their heads, their polite smiles instantly morphing into expressions of curious judgment. "We forgot our purse and cards." Her mother, Eleanor, chimed in, her laughter even louder, more cutting, a direct assault on my very being. "Imagine. At a party like this. So careless." The whispers began immediately, a low, insidious hum that felt like tiny, burning embers landing on my exposed skin. My face flushed, a searing wave of heat that had nothing to do with the warmth of the room and everything to do with the public, deliberate humiliation unfolding before me. Mark, bless him, tried to pull me away, muttering desperate apologies under his breath, but I was rooted to the spot, frozen in the harsh, humiliating spotlight of their cruel, echoing mirth. This wasn't just about a forgotten purse, it was a detonation, the culmination of years of thinly veiled contempt, subtle digs, and their unwavering belief that I was simply not good enough for their illustrious family. The sheer malice in their eyes, the unadulterated joy in my public suffering, confirmed every insecurity they had ever managed to plant in my mind. They wanted to expose me, to brand me as irresponsible, as a burden, as someone who fundamentally did not belong in their meticulously curated world. And in that moment, with Mark's mortified silence as my only shield, they were succeeding beyond their wildest, most hateful dreams. The air around me crackled with their triumph, a suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest, stealing my breath. Every eye felt like a spotlight, every whisper a condemnation. They had meticulously set the stage for this, and now, I was the unwilling star of their cruel comedy. But amidst the burning shame and the raw, psychological agony, a tiny, defiant spark ignited deep within me. This wasn't just humiliation, this was a declaration of war. And what they didn't realize was that their cruel laughter, meant to break me, was about to become the very fire that forged my unbreakable resolve. They might have laughed then, but I vowed, right there in that suffocating ballroom, that the day would come when I would have the last, most satisfying, silence. To truly grasp the icy grip of that laughter, you need to understand the quiet battles that had been waged for years. It wasn't just a purse, it was a symbol, a tiny crack in a dam I'd worked tirelessly to build. When Mark and I first met, he saw past the modest apartment I shared, past the evening classes I took after working all day. He saw the ambition, the grit, the woman who believed in carving her own path, and that's what he loved. His parents, however, Eleanor and Robert, saw only what I lacked, the right family name, the inherited wealth, the effortless glide through their elite social circles. Our engagement dinner was the first real skirmish. Eleanor, with her perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, had leaned in, her voice a low purr. "Are you quite sure, dear Mark? Chloe is charming, but perhaps not quite the match we envisioned for you. Bethany, her echo, had simply smirked from across the table, a silent accomplice in the subtle assault. Their method was always the same, a whisper of concern, a gentle suggestion, always leaving just enough room for plausible deniability, yet each word a direct hit to my confidence. My best friend, Sarah, saw through it all from day one. They're intimidated by you, Chloe, she'd insist, squeezing my hand when I felt my spirit dimming. You're real, and they're a performance. Sarah, who'd navigated her own share of family drama, was my anchor, always reminding me of the strength they couldn't see, the resilience they couldn't break. She knew that beneath their polished veneer, there was a deep insecurity, a fear of anything that disrupted their carefully constructed world. Our financial situation became their favorite weapon. Mark had poured everything, and I mean everything, into his tech startup, a bold gamble we both believed in. This meant our personal funds were stretched thin, a vulnerability I guarded fiercely. But my in-laws, with their vast networks, always seemed to sniff out our struggles. They'd offered generous loans, each one laced with patronizing advice about Mark's reckless choices, always subtly hinting that if he just cut ties with certain distractions, meaning me, his path would be smoother, his success assured. When Mark's startup hit a brutal snag, losing a key investor, the whispers intensified. Bethany, ever the diligent informant, ensured that vague concerns about our stability reached the ears of mutual acquaintances, planting seeds of doubt about Mark's leadership and, by extension, my ability to support him through adversity. She never said anything directly incriminating, but her questions, her worries, were like a slow-acting poison, designed to undermine us from within. The forgotten purse at Aunt Carol's party wasn't a random act of cruelty, it was the perfectly timed, meticulously planned public execution of their long-standing campaign against me. They wanted to expose our perceived weakness, to prove their narrative right. They wanted to break us. And for a terrifying moment, standing there, drenched in their scorn, I truly believed they might. The sting of their laughter, the humiliation in front of Aunt Carol's entire esteemed guest list, gnawed at me for days. But as the raw shame began to subside, a chilling realization took its place. This wasn't just a spontaneous act of cruelty, a spur-of-the-moment jab. No, this felt far too precise, too perfectly executed. It felt like a setup. And the more I replayed the events of that night, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a picture far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. It began with seemingly insignificant details. Mark mentioned that Bethany had called him right before the party, asking about our plans, specifically if we were bringing a separate bag for gifts. He'd brushed it off as her usual nosiness. Then, just a few days earlier, an email had landed in my inbox, supposedly from Aunt Carol's party planner. It listed specific payment instructions for the charity auction, emphasizing that all contributions must be made via card at the event table. In the rush of getting ready, stressed and distracted, I'd barely glanced at it, simply registered the card-only part. It was too perfect. The true depths of the conspiracy revealed themselves when I spoke to Aunt Carol herself. Her voice, usually so bright, was laced with genuine concern. "Chloe, darling, I felt so terrible about what happened. Why didn't you just tell me about your purse? We could have easily handled the payment for the charity auction." My heart pounded. "But Aunt Carol," I replied, a cold dread washing over me, "I received an email saying all payments had to be by card at the table. That's why we left the cash at home." Aunt Carol paused, then her voice dropped, laced with confusion. "No, dear. We always have a cash option, and we'd never turn away a guest without payment. My planner certainly didn't send an email like that." That was the moment. The floor beneath me seemed to disappear. Bethany. It had to be Bethany. She had access to Aunt Carol's guest list, to our contact information. She must have crafted that email, disguising it as legitimate, specifically to ensure we only brought our cards. She knew our financial situation was tight, she'd clearly been fishing for that information for weeks. She hadn't forgotten the purse, she had ensured we would arrive empty-handed, leaving us vulnerable to her public attack. This wasn't just a malicious prank, it was a calculated, premeditated strike. The stakes escalated immediately. Whispers about our perceived financial recklessness began to circulate amongst Mark's potential investors. Eleanor and Robert, meanwhile, were subtly capitalizing on the public incident, using it to push their agenda. They began suggesting to Mark that he needed to reevaluate his partnerships, a thinly veiled attack on me and my perceived inability to handle our finances. Bethany, their silent, smiling accomplice, ensured the narrative spread. This wasn't just about embarrassing me anymore, it was about destroying Mark's business and, by extension, our future. Their true, ruthless ambition was laid bare, and I realized then, with a terrifying clarity, that this was a fight for everything. They had pushed me to a precipice, but what they didn't know was that a breaking point often leads to a breakthrough. The days following the party, after discovering Bethany's deceit, blurred into a sickening spiral of public shame and private despair. The whispers weren't just in my head anymore, they were tangible, following me from the grocery store aisles to my quiet coffee shop. Every sympathetic glance felt like pity, every averted eye a judgment. Mark, usually my unwavering rock, became a ghost in our own home. He buried himself in his work, convinced that the scandal of my perceived carelessness had torpedoed his most critical investor meeting. He blamed himself, blamed our tight finances, but beneath it all, I felt the silent, unspoken accusation aimed squarely at me. Then came the night he finally broke. After yet another investor deal crumbled, leaving him drained and defeated, he came home, collapsing onto the couch. "Chloe," his voice was raw, barely a whisper, "I don't know if we can come back from this. My parents, they're saying I should just focus on myself. On my future. They're offering to bail out the company, but only if I make some changes." His gaze was fixed on the floor, unable to meet my eyes, and the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. The changes were clear, they wanted him to leave me, to abandon our shared dreams and our struggling startup. That was it. That was my absolute breaking point. The crushing weight of public humiliation, the fear of losing everything we built, and now, the terrifying prospect of losing Mark's support, his love, his belief in us. I stumbled into the bathroom, the cold tile a stark contrast to the fire raging inside me. I stared at my reflection, tears streaming down my face, the image distorted by my own pain. Is this how it ends? I thought, the cruel laughter of Bethany and Eleanor echoing in my mind, a tormenting symphony of my failure. I felt utterly alone, completely, irrevocably broken. The sudden ring of my phone jolted me. It was Sarah. "Chloe, are you okay?" I heard some awful rumors circulating. I couldn't form words, just choked sobs. Sarah, my loyal, fiercely protective friend, immediately understood the depth of my despair. She didn't offer empty reassurances, she just listened, her steady presence a lifeline. "They want to destroy you, Chloe," she said softly, her voice firm, "but they can't. Not if you don't let them." Her words were a faint spark, a tiny flicker of defiance in the vast darkness. But the all-is-lost moment had arrived. Mark's family had presented their ultimatum, their financial backing for his startup, contingent on him dissolving our partnership, both personally and professionally. They framed it as a fresh start for him, free from my distractions. My name, my integrity, my entire worth was being systematically dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. I felt like a burden, a millstone around Mark's neck. They had achieved their goal. I was defeated. But then, as the last tear escaped, a strange, cold calm settled over me. A tiny, almost imperceptible seed of anger began to sprout. This wasn't despair anymore, it was a hard, quiet fury. They had tried to break me, to erase me. But they hadn't succeeded. Not completely. The tears stopped. My eyes, though swollen, hardened. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I would show them what true resilience looked like. Just when I thought I was utterly defeated, when the weight of their betrayal felt too heavy to bear, a crack appeared in the darkness. A tiny sliver of light, from the most unexpected corner, revealed a truth that would change everything. It started with a phone call, not from a close friend or a family member, but from a distant cousin of Mark's, David. He was a quiet man, a retired corporate lawyer known for observing more than participating in family drama, someone I barely knew, yet his voice on the phone was surprisingly steady, almost urgent. "Chloe," he said, his voice low, as if sharing a secret, "I heard about what happened at the party. It's truly awful. But I think I might know why Bethany is so set on discrediting you and Mark's startup." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you mean?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. He paused, a deliberate silence, before dropping the bombshell that sent my world spinning. Bethany isn't just driven by family pride or spite. Her husband, Richard, is a silent investor in a competing tech startup, one that's trying to acquire a very specific patent, the same one Mark's company is fighting for. If Mark's business fails, Richard's investment stands to make a fortune. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just petty family squabbling, it was cold, calculated sabotage. The forgotten purse wasn't merely to embarrass me, it was a deliberate act to damage Mark's reputation, scare off potential investors, and clear the path for Richard's competing venture. Bethany wasn't just a cruel sister-in-law, she was a calculated corporate operative, betraying her own family for financial gain. And Eleanor and Robert, in their blind pursuit of status and image, were either completely fooled or, worse, subtly complicit in their daughter's scheme. David, who became my unlikely mentor, explained the deeper implications. "They've been playing a dangerous game with insider information, Chloe. And that email Bethany sent you, posing as Aunt Carol's planner? That's strong evidence of malicious intent and could lead to serious legal trouble." He wasn't a sudden, perfect savior, but a man with a long-standing dislike for Richard's shady business practices, who saw an opportunity for justice. He had quietly gathered information over the years, observing Richard's patterns, waiting for the right moment. This revelation completely flipped the script. I was no longer just the victim of a cruel joke. I was a crucial piece in a high-stakes corporate battle. Bethany, the perceived antagonist, was now revealed as the architect of a deliberate financial attack. My despair evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. The rules of the game had changed. And with this newfound knowledge, I had an unlikely ally in David, someone who knew the real intricacies of their world. The immediate complication was clear. How do I expose Bethany's malice and Richard's unethical dealings without completely alienating Mark, who was still reeling from his own family's manipulations? The tension was almost unbearable. I had the truth, but how to wield it? The reckoning was about to begin, and I knew it would be explosive. Armed with David's bombshell revelations, the fog of defeat that had clouded my mind finally lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The underdog, battered but not broken, was finally finding her footing. My first, most crucial step was to reach out to Mark. He was still reeling, caught between his family's manipulation and the crushing weight of his startup's struggles. I knew I couldn't just throw accusations at his sister. I had to present the truth in a way that left no room for doubt, no space for denial. I sat him down and, with a steady hand, laid out the evidence, the fabricated email Bethany sent, the one Aunt Carol confirmed she never authorized. Then, I showed him the detailed connections David had painstakingly uncovered, the financial ties between Bethany's husband, Richard, and the competing company, the one gunning for Mark's patent. Mark's face, initially a mask of disbelief, slowly contorted into a profound anger. Not at me, but at the chilling betrayal by his own flesh and blood. The pain in his eyes was raw, but beneath it, a furious determination began to set in. Our first real confrontation with Eleanor and Robert happened in their immaculate living room, a place that usually felt like a gilded cage. I let Mark take the lead. This was his family, his pain. He calmly, but firmly, presented the evidence of Bethany's calculated actions. Eleanor, ever the authority figure, initially scoffed, dismissing it as Chloe's wild accusations, a desperate attempt to protect her perfect family image. But Robert, though slow to anger, listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to dawning horror as Mark laid out the facts: the email, the financial paper trail, the precise timing of their malicious interference. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect family began to crack, audibly. When Bethany was brought into the discussion, she attempted her usual performance, feigning innocence, tears welling in her eyes, playing the victim. "How could you accuse me, your own sister, of such a thing?" she wailed, her voice trembling. But I was done with her theatrics. "Bethany," I stated, my voice steady, cutting through her practiced sobs, "you manipulated Aunt Carol's party, you sent that fake email, and you leveraged our vulnerable finances to sabotage Mark's company. You betrayed us for money, pure and simple." The simple, unvarnished truth, spoken aloud, pierced her act. The antagonist's downfall had begun, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating erosion of their lives within their own family. Mark, seeing the full extent of the betrayal, made a firm, irreversible decision. He refused his parents' conditional bailout. He would fight for his company on his own terms, and he would do it with me, not by abandoning me. This crucial shift in Mark's allegiance, from his family's suffocating influence to our shared future, was a massive victory. Soon after, whispers about Richard's unethical practices, likely stirred by David's discreet network, began to spread online. The tide was turning, the power dynamics shifting. The stage was set for the final, explosive showdown, and this time, I wouldn't just be ready, I'd be leading the charge. The final confrontation wasn't a dramatic yelling match in some fancy restaurant, a public spectacle designed for immediate gratification. No, this was far more devastating. It played out in the sterile, high-stakes environment of a corporate boardroom, witnessed by potential investors and, critically, by a sharp legal team David had quietly assembled. This wasn't about shouting, it was about the cold, hard unveiling of truth. This was the moment where every secret would be exposed, every lie laid bare. This was the ultimate role reversal. Mark's startup, against all odds, had secured a make-or-break meeting with a major venture capitalist firm. Bethany and Richard, blinded by their own arrogance and confidence in their sabotage, somehow caught wind of the meeting. They decided to crash it, claiming they needed to warn the investors about Mark's unstable business partner, meaning me. They walked in, radiating false confidence, ready to deliver what they thought would be their final, crushing blow, a perfectly timed interruption to seal our doom. Richard, ever the smooth operator, began his practiced pitch, outlining why his company was the superior investment, subtly weaving in veiled references to Mark's distractions and financial instability. Bethany sat beside him, a smug smirk playing on her lips, undoubtedly ready to launch into her sis-in-law performance the moment a pause presented itself. But this time, I wasn't just ready, I was prepared to dismantle their entire charade. As Richard finished, Mark stepped forward, his posture straight, his voice calm and steady. "Thank you, Richard, for your insightful presentation," he began, the politeness in his tone laced with a quiet steel. He then, with David's discreet cue, projected onto the massive screen behind them the very email Bethany had fabricated and sent to me. Then, he presented the detailed financial analysis David had prepared, meticulously illustrating the direct financial link between Bethany and Richard's investment in the competing company, and the exact timeline of their calculated attempts to undermine Mark's venture. The room fell into an unnerving silence. Richard's face went white. Bethany, the architect of my misery, gasped, her smug smirk evaporating instantly, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. This was not her script. David then spoke, his voice calm but firm, outlining the severe legal ramifications of their actions: corporate espionage, defamation, and malicious interference. He detailed a potential lawsuit that would not only expose their illicit dealings to the world but also put their carefully guarded personal fortunes at significant risk. The investors, who had moments ago looked at us with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, now stared at Richard and Bethany with palpable disgust. The dramatic justice was swift, and it was brutal. Richard's company lost the investment deal on the spot. Worse, the venture capitalist firm, utterly appalled by the level of deception, made it clear they would share this information with their entire network, effectively blacklisting Richard and Bethany from any future legitimate investments. Eleanor and Robert, who Mark had insisted be present to witness the meeting, sat stunned, watching their daughter's meticulously constructed life unravel before their very eyes. Their faces, once filled with haughty amusement, were now a study in profound shock and raw shame, a complete and utter role reversal from that humiliating party. The sis-in-law line, once a weapon of public humiliation, now hung in the air, a phantom echo of their past cruelty. But this time, it was their turn to feel exposed, ridiculed, and utterly defeated. I looked at Bethany, truly looked at her, and saw not just a cruel antagonist, but a desperate woman, consumed by her own greed and envy. The climactic showdown wasn't just about financial victory, it was about the undeniable triumph of truth over deception, and integrity over malice. It set the stage for the most crucial part of all, the moral lesson that would resonate long after the applause died down. Life has a funny way of teaching us what truly matters. That day in the boardroom, watching Bethany and Richard's carefully constructed world shatter, I understood something deep and powerful. The laughter that had echoed through Aunt Carol's party, meant to destroy me, had instead become the fire in which my own strength was forged. The undeniable lesson, clear as day, was this: integrity, even when facing public humiliation and the most malicious attacks, is the only true currency that holds lasting value. For Bethany and Richard, the consequences were severe, far beyond what they could have imagined. Richard's business reputation was utterly ruined. His company faced not only the immediate loss of that crucial investment but also multiple legal challenges, calmly and relentlessly pursued by David and other past victims of his shady dealings. Bethany, once the queen of her social circle, found herself completely cut off from the very people she'd worked so hard to impress. Her image was permanently tarnished, her name now whispered with disgust, synonymous with deceit. Their wealth, once their pride and joy, became a gilded cage, trapping them in a world that no longer trusted them. They learned, the hardest way possible, that manipulation and cruelty come with a far higher price than any financial gain. Eleanor and Robert, the authority figures who had initially enabled their daughter's actions, were finally forced to confront the ugly truth about their own blind spots and their misplaced priorities. They saw, firsthand, the devastating consequences of valuing appearances and social status above genuine character and honesty. Their relationship with Mark, and slowly, carefully, with me, began a difficult but absolutely necessary process of healing. They started to see me not as an outsider, but as the woman who stood by their son, who fought for his true honor. It was a slow, painful awakening for them, a journey towards understanding real familial love and respect. Mark's startup, once teetering on the brink of collapse, soared. With the truth finally exposed and the malicious interference gone, new investors saw his true vision and, more importantly, his unwavering resilience. He emerged a far wiser businessman, sharp and discerning, always wary of hidden agendas, but also fiercely protective of those he loved. He learned the profound value of trusting his instincts and, most importantly, trusting me, seeing me as an equal partner in every sense. And me? I learned that true strength isn't about never falling, but about how powerfully you rise. I learned that humiliation, no matter how excruciating, can be the most potent catalyst for growth. My journey from the publicly shamed sis-in-law to the resilient woman who stood up for herself, for her husband, and for truth, was finally complete. That initial public humiliation, designed to break me, had been an unexpected blessing. It revealed the true depths of their malice, but more importantly, it unearthed the unwavering power of my own spirit. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're laughed at, humiliated, or cast aside, remember my story. Remember that the stinging pain of betrayal can be transformed into the unstoppable power of conviction. Don't ever let someone else's cruel laughter define who you are. Let it fuel you. Because sometimes, the very people who try their absolute hardest to tear you down are the ones who, unknowingly, give you the unshakable strength to build yourself back up, stronger, wiser, and more radiant than ever before. Rise above their laughter. Let your integrity be your loudest, most undeniable reply.